Thanks for that introduction. I'll share my screen now. Can you see my screen? Hi, am I audible?
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Uh, I'm so excited to be the part of the seventh edition World Congress on Cancer Research and Oncology. And thanks for inviting me as a speaker. Today, I'll be discussing about the predictors of dysplasia in oral submucous fibrosis. This was a study conducted in the Department of Oral Pathology in ACPM Dental College, India. I am working as an adjunct faculty in ACPM Dental College, and I am currently presenting from Rhode Island, US. Oral submucous fibrosis, by definition, is a chronic, progressive, potentially malignant oral disease that is caused by. Okay. That causes the stiffness, burning sensation, and limited mouth opening, along with the vesicular formation in the oral mucosa. It is prevalent mainly in the South and Southeast Asia, where there is more areca nut chewing, tobacco, and alcohol consumption habit is present. The oral submucous fibrosis is mainly caused by areca nut chewing due to its chemical aracodine. It has a 0.2 to 7.6% of prevalence among the Indian subcontinent, and it is strongly linked to areca nut and tobacco use. Also, the areca nut, tobacco, and alcohol, they act as a synergistic agent and thus cause the stiffening of the oral mucosa. World Health Organization categorized this oral submucous fibrosis as a oral potentially malignant disorder, and they reorganized and in year 2020. It is triggered primarily by areca nut chewing, and it is a multifactorial. It involves the environmental, genetic, as well as nutritional factors. Environmental factors, they include the areca nut chewing as well as the betel leaf consumption along with the lime. And there are genetic factors also, and hereditary etiology is also present. But as it is a multifactorial, it has definitely contributing to the different, it is a combination of different factors. And the nutritional factors includes iron deficiency anemia, B12 deficiency. It often leads to the inflammation, and it increases the permeability of the oral mucosa, which contributes to the additional oxidative stress and a collagen deposition that often leads to the tissue fibrosis. So there are different layers of the oral mucosa, the mucosa, submucosa, and lamina propria. When there is a fibrosis present by the excess collagen deposition in the layer of lamina propria, you can see the tissue fibrosis more evidently, and those are present in the palpable tissue bands, which is extending to the tonsillar fascial pillars as well as the buccinator, masseter, and in advanced cases, even uvula is involved, and patient cannot speak because the soft palate is not mobile. Um, the malignant transformation risk for this oral submucous fibrosis, which is mainly prevalent, as I already said, in the Indian subcontinent, China, as well as Taiwan. There are 7 to 30% of its risk of developing the cancer. Hence, WHO categorized as OPMD. The clinical signs of this oral submucous fibrosis are mucosal stiffness, reduced mouth opening, fibrous bands, and in some cases, the pigmentation is also present. The histopathology of this biomarkers is definitely, and first categorization is done by the epithelial dysplasia. So what is dysplasia? Dysplasia is an abnormal shape and size of the tissue in the biopsy specimen. There is abnormal number of nuclei also. There is polyploid nucleus are also present, and this epithelial dysplasia is also characterized by varying number of cells. Um, it is present in 10 to 15% of early OSMF cases and in 30 to 50% of advanced cases. Early stage of oral submucous fibrosis is characterized by restricted mouth opening, but it is just confined to the buccal mucosa. And in the advanced cases, the posterior part, along with the lateral pterygoid muscle, which further restricts the opening of mouth. And in the very advanced cases, patient cannot eat or drink without use of straw. It is that debilitating condition. It is often its percentage is often underestimated because it is mainly seen in the rural population, because the habit of areca nut chewing, it is more prevalent in the rural population. Dysplasia is characterized by the cellular atypia, nuclear changes, and altered epithelial layers. The biomarkers of this oral submucous fibrosis, they include P53 mutation. P53 is a guardian of human genome. So the histopathological markers is a P53 mutation, cytokine expression, and cell cycle dysregulation. What is the importance or the clinical relevance of this oral submucous fibrosis? Early recognition of the dysplasia is vital in preventing the malignant progression and guide the risk-based management. I was a part of the European Consortium project on a diagnosis of a pre-malignant lesion by use of artificial intelligence. There we have diagnosed a lot of dysplasia cases as a pre-malignant condition, and we have observed and followed up them for the years and years, and they turned out to be malignant. But the patients whose counseling was done for the cessation of habit or the etiopathological factor was removed, the dysplasia was limited to that particular area and was not progressed with a faster rate. For this study in the Department of Oral Pathology, uh, we we used cases from the period of January 2015 to June 2024. And we analyzed those records from October to December 2024. And ethical approval from Institutional Ethical Committee was obtained for the study. The guidelines were followed was a declaration of Helsinki. And this research was published in the Nature Springer's journal Curious in April 2025. The sample size was estimated by using G-Power software. The parameters were 85% power and 5% alpha error. And based on estimated 15 to 20% of the prevalence of dysplasia to oral submucous fibrosis. So our statistical committee decided that the final required sample was 120 cases out of 545 cases we have schemed for the study. So there were certain inclusion and exclusion criteria for this study was followed. The inclusion criteria was clinically and histopathologically confirmed cases of oral submucous fibrosis. The complete record, including the demographics, mouth opening, burning sensation by visual analog scale, which was signed by patient himself, lesion site, habits, which are documented like tobacco, alcohol, smoking in different forms, adequate epithelial thickness for histopathological sample was the part of a inclusion criteria. The exclusion criteria was included the incomplete records that we have eliminated, then prior medical or surgical management of the oral submucous fibrosis. There were some patients who were treated with the different nutritional supplements as a medicinal management. And there were some patients who were treated with the placental extract, steroid injections, as well as hyaluronidase uh, that causes the fibrinolysis of oral submucous fibrosis bands were used, and some patients, those were managed by the locoregional flaps and coronoidectomy for the improvement of the mouth opening and excisional of the fibrous bands. Those were eliminated from the study. So what we included were the only fresh cases what were reported to the Department of Oral Pathology. We also eliminated the patients with the systemic diseases and other malignancies and other potentially malignant disorders like leukoplegia and erythroplakia. Leukoplegia is a white, unscrapable patch, and that is often considered as a potentially malignant disorder. And the erythroplakia, it is a red, fiery red patch present in a oral mucosa, which is also the indicator of a pre-malignancy, and it has a highest malignant potential among all potentially malignant conditions. So among these 545 records we have screened, we could only include 120 cases in this retrospective study. We evaluated these cases based on demographics, clinical condition such as mouth opening, the normal mouth opening between the two incisors like upper incisors and lower incisor is approximately 3.5 to 4 centimeter. That is considered as a normal mouth opening. So we examine the patients based on the clinical findings, and we calculated the interincisal distance for each patient, and we have documented it. There is a burning sensation with the visual analog scale that patient himself has signed, then clinical staging of the oral submucous fibrosis based on the extent of fibrous band that we have palpated with the bimanual palpation and the restriction of the tongue movement, even the floor of mouth muscles they have involved or not, the pharynx, uvula, fascial pillars that we have staged clinically. Then we have documented the site of a lesion and the habits of a patient. So how many times patient uses areca nut, tobacco, alcohol, and other things. Also, the histopathological grading of the oral submucous fibrosis was documented that we are going to discuss in the subsequent slides. Epithelial keratinization, then how thick is the epithelium that we have determined by using the 20x magnification on the microscope, and how much is the prevalence of a dysplasia is also documented. These are the slides with the hematoxylin and eosin stained sections with the 20x magnification. In the very first slide, we can see this epithelium which is thinned out. In this slide, we can see this epithelium. It is thinned out. So it is graded as a stage 1 histopathological grading of oral submucous fibrosis. There, there is a collagen deposition, but it is in a very small amount. Also, there is a presence of juxtaepithelial hyalinization, and then epithelium looks little distorted, and thin epithelium increases the permeability to carcinogens, and that further increases the thickness by fibrosis, as you can see in the next picture. And in the final grade 3 of oral submucous fibrosis, you can see the lamina propria, that is the muscle layer of the oral mucosa. It is also involved, and there is a highly keratinized epithelium which is present. So this epithelium is the thickest among all. Our statistical committee, they use the SPSS software and Shapiro-Wilk test to assess the data distribution, and they represented the data into the categorical and continuous variables. Analytical tests were done by using the logistic regression and discriminant analysis. So there were results obtained by the use of this descriptive findings. So we analyzed 120 cases. Out of that, 75% cases were males and 25% of the cases were female. Most of them were consuming tobacco in different forms. 85% of the patients, they were consuming tobacco in a different forms. So smoking was present in 55% of these patients. Alcohol consumption was done by 50%, like half of this oral submucous fibrosis patient. And burning sensation by visual analog scale was reported by 60% of the patients. The clinical staging with the mouth opening between 3 to 3.5 centimeter with the palpable fibrous bands was present in stage 1 of the oral submucous fibrosis, that was present in 40% of patients. Stage 2, when the mouth opening was between 2 to 3.5 centimeter, it was 30% of cases. And stage 3, it is very restricted mouth opening where the oral submucous fibrosis includes the oral aperture also, where patient has real difficulty in speaking and consuming food and liquids. It is present in 30% of cases. By histopathological grading, mild 25% of cases were graded as mild, 40% of cases were graded as moderate, and severe cases were 35% reported by the study. Keratinization was present in maximum, that is 70% of cases, and there was excessive collagen deposition. Epithelial thinning was observed. That was a mild oral submucous fibrosis, or that we can consider as a starting of oral submucous fibrosis, was observed in 50% of cases. Overall dysplasia was indicated in 40% of the cases. With the discussion summary, alcohol consumption was emerged as most significant predictor of dysplasia. It was contributed to 30% of this predictive model. Alcohol, according to our study, was acting as a co-carcinogen. It is the primary carcinogen was arachnoids, and the compounds contributing to the oxidative stress from areca nut consumption. But alcohol is definitely served as expediting factor for this the progression of oral submucous fibrosis cases. So it acted as a co-carcinogen and it enhanced the mucosal permeability and oxidative stress, and it accelerated the malignant transformation in oral submucous fibrosis cases. We have observed this oral submucous fibrosis in the second decade of life and in the third decade of life. Also, there was one case who reported oral submucous fibrosis in the first decade of life. It is more common in a younger patient, and that's the most concerning thing for us. And we compared our study with the different studies, and our finding aligned with the Morse et al. Study. Also, histopathologically, there was epithelial atrophy or thinning that had a strong correlation with the dysplasia. In the patients where the epithelium of the oral mucosa was thinned out, there were the chances of dysplasia were more prevalent in that case. The thinner epithelium reflected reduced proliferation and increased fibrosis. Also, there was a weakening of mucosal barrier, and that increases cancer susceptibility because alcohol can easily penetrate through thinner epithelium. It also emphasized the need for routine histopathological screening to detect the early epithelial atrophy as a precursor of the dysplasia. And our study was supported by Sarode et al., who was the person who gave the definition of the oral submucous fibrosis, and it is the most accepted one in year 1976. The smoking and tobacco were ranked third predictive strength according to our finding. It also contributed to the oxidative stress, DNA damage, and altered cell signaling pathways. It potentiated when combined with the alcohol and areca nut. As it is a multifactorial etiology, so all these factors they act together, and they decide the severity of oral submucous fibrosis. Tobacco metabolism produces nitrosamines and nitronicotinoids. Those are the key agents for oral carcinogenesis. Tobacco undoubtedly in any form is contributing factor to the oral, head, neck, as well as the pharyngeal cancer. We got to see every case, almost every case. There were just 0.01% of exceptions when I was working in a Tata Cancer Hospital. It is one of the Apex Institute that operates cancer in India. And those operated like 500 plus cases during the peak COVID time. In that institute, I got to see most of the oral cancer patients, they were consuming tobacco. And there were half of the patients who consume alcohol too. So that potentiates the risk of malignant transformation in all the oral cancers. Tobacco, the non-significant predictors for this study were burning sensation, no statistical correlation with the dysplasia. So burning sensation is just a symptom. It not necessarily maybe because of the risk of malignant transformation. It may be associated, but it per se it will not act as a risk factor for the malignant transformation. Keratinization also had a minimal predictive value, and it reflects the adaptive epithelial response rather than a marker of a dysplasia. So reduced mouth opening was significantly associated with dysplasia. And it reflected the advanced stages of the fibrosis, where the masseter and the other muscles of mastications were involved with the lateral pterygoid. In some cases, it becomes bony hard. In those cases, to relieve the fibrosis, along with the excision of the fibrous band and reconstruction with the local flaps, in very advanced cases, we had to perform coronoidectomy in order to improve the mouth opening. but there are high chances of relapse because the wound heals by fibrosis. So, regular mouth opening exercises and extensive oral physiotherapy is advocated in these cases. Also, tobacco metabolism, the early intervention to improve the mouth opening is vital for preventing the progression and improving the quality of life. We have performed a canonical analysis that separated the two variables. These are the dysplastic and non-dysplastic oral submucous fibrosis cases. Mouth opening was correlated with non-dysplastic cases, and alcohol, smoking, tobacco frequency clustered with dysplastic cases. So, this study also validates the multifactorial etiology of the oral submucous fibrosis that is often combined with the lifestyle factors. And in the patients who are having anemia, pernicious anemia, B12 deficiency, their oral mucosa is more susceptible to these changes. And for these patients, this etiological factors, they act faster as compared to well-nourished patients. So the clinical implications and recommendations of this study, the early detection, regular histopathological evaluation for epithelial thinning and fibrosis has to be done. The early detection helps in the prevention of cancer. Lifestyle intervention is very, very important. The targeted campaigns that uh, the use of effective tools like tobacco cessation council and other smoking habits for high risk population. It is very, very important to do that counseling on a periodic basis and motivate this patient for cessation of habit. Screening has to be conducted at regular intervals, preferably every 3 months, and that should incorporate the habit history and epithelial thickness assessment into the standard diagnostic protocols. There are certain advantages and disadvantages of conducting biopsy at a regular interval. If you conduct a biopsy after every 6 months, but the tissue sample has to be between the potentially malignant area and the normal epithelium, and the smaller piece of the tissue by using scrape biopsy should be evaluated. If you do a knife biopsy in such cases, that might act as a traumatic response to the tissue, and that aggravates the response, and that can convert the potentially malignant lesion into the faster pace into the malignancy because of excessive tissue proliferation as a trauma response. Preventive focus has to be on this prevention strategy for oral submucous fibrosis that should emphasize the public health education, cessation programs, habit modification to limit the spread of OSMF and its progression. We should integrate the molecular biomarkers like P53, cytokines, cell cycle markers to refine the risk and risk prediction and enable the personalized management of this oral submucous fibrosis. Our study had limitations too. So, first of all, it was a retrospective study. So, it depended on the archival data. And there was definitely potential for missing and inconsistent records was present. Like patients, sometimes they lost follow-up or records were incomplete. The sample size was 120, and it may not represent the diverse demographics of this oral submucous fibrosis. So we have conducted this study in from only one demographic area. So vast variety of the population was not a part of the study. That was a huge limitation. And lack of a standardized histopathological grading could introduce observer variability. Not every time the person who took a biopsy was the same, and not every time the person who analyzed the biopsy specimen was the same. So there was definitely chance of the observer bias. No molecular or genetic data was included, and there was limiting mechanistic insight because of that. Because we did not have all the resources to complete this molecular analysis in our oral pathology department. The environmental and regional factors were also not assessed for the study. So, in conclusion, alcohol consumption, epithelial thinning, and tobacco use are three key determinants for dysplastic transformation of oral submucous fibrosis. Reduced mouth opening correlated strongly with the disease severity and the progression. Keratinization and burning sensation were frequent, but they are not predictive for the dysplasia. A regular histopathological monitoring and lifestyle modifications, especially alcohol and smoking cessation, were crucial in preventing these strategies. The future prospective molecular integrated studies are definitely essential to refine the diagnostic precision of the study and develop the targeted interventions for high-risk patients. Now you can assess just a salivary biomarkers, which is very non-invasive method for diagnosis of any pre-malignant lesions and conditions. And there were huge studies that are ongoing in a resource-rich setting for all of this diagnostic tools, which are very non-invasive, and patient can get those checked by themselves in home also. So, but that's a long-term goal, and uh, we are definitely working on getting the best possible outcome with the minimally invasive tests. So the ethical approval for this was obtained by Institutional Ethical Committee, and informed consent for the treatment and publication were obtained by all the participants, and no animals were harmed. There was no conflict of interest, and no financial relationships with any organizations were received for the study. I thank you for your patient listening. And this topic, it is very vast, and there are different treatment modalities that we are observing for the treatment of oral submucous fibrosis. In some cases, we have injected the placental extract along with the dexamethasone. These permutations, combinations, they work for some patients. Oral physiotherapy has a strong role in a management of oral submucous fibrosis, and some patients, they had to be treated with the extensive surgery in the advanced cases. So thanks for your patient listening. I welcome if any questions are there.